Listen to me closely. Deep inside of you, there are two versions of yourself. One is strong, hungry, unstoppable, willing to do whatever it takes to rise to your true potential. The other one, the weak version, wakes up every morning looking for excuses, holding on to fear, craving comfort and whispering to you, maybe tomorrow, maybe later, maybe it's too hard. That weak version is stealing your future. It's stealing your dreams, your health, your relationships, your success. And if you let it live, if you keep feeding it with your time, your laziness, your fear, and then you will never step into the life you were born to live. So today, right now, you need to make a decision, kill that weak version of yourself. Kill the version of you that hits snooze instead of getting up. Kill the version of you that scrolls through social media for hours instead of building your empire. Kill the version of you that avoids challenges, that hides from responsibility, that says, this is just who I am. No, that is not who you are. That is who you settled for being. The real you, the powerful you, is buried underneath layers of doubt, excuses, and fear. And the only way to set that person free is to slaughter the weakness every time it shows up. When that voice says, take it easy, you say, no. I go harder. When that voice says, you can't, you answer, watch me. When that voice says, stay comfortable, you scream back, comfort is my enemy. Your destiny does not belong to the weak version of you. That version will never achieve greatness. That version will never inspire anyone. That version will never lead, never conquer, never live with fire. But the stronger version, the one filled with courage, energy, and relentless drive, that version is waiting for you to step up and claim it. So here's the truth. Every day you are in a fight between the weak you and the strong you. And every decision you make is a vote for one of them. Do you feed your weakness or do you feed your strength? Do you choose excuses or do you choose action? Do you stay small or do you rise? You already know the answer. You know deep down what you must do. The weak version of you has to die so the powerful version of you can finally live. So make the decision right now. Burn the bridges. Destroy the excuses. Cut off the old patterns. Say it with me. The weak version of me is dead. I kill it today. And from this moment forward, I unleash the strongest, boldest, most relentless version of myself the world has ever seen. Because the world doesn't need your weakness. It needs your strength. It needs your vision. It needs your power. So kill that weak version of yourself and rise. Destroy excuses before they destroy your future is not just a catchy phrase. It is the very core of transformation, because every person who has ever felt stuck or trapped in the same cycle knows that the greatest prison is not the lack of resources, not the lack of opportunities, not even the external circumstances that seem to stand in the way, but the web of excuses we weave for ourselves day after day, excuses that feel so real, so convincing, that we forget they are lies we are feeding ourselves. And when you think about it, the difference between those who rise to greatness and those who remain average comes down to one thing: the willingness to silence excuses before they become permanent barriers. Because excuses are seductive. They whisper comfort into your ear. They tell you that you can start tomorrow. They reassure you that your failures are not your fault. They soothe your ego by shifting blame to the world. But in reality, excuses are poison, slow but deadly. And the more you drink from that cup, the weaker your resolve becomes until you no longer recognize the person staring back in the mirror. Excuses dress themselves up as logic. They often sound rational. They sound like protection. They sound like truth. Yet behind the curtain, they are nothing but the voice of fear trying to hold you hostage. And every time you buy into an excuse, you give away your power, you surrender your control, and you begin to live as a victim instead of a creator of your destiny. Because think about how many times in your life you said you wanted something deeply, maybe it was better health, financial freedom, a stronger relationship, more confidence, a dream career, but instead of moving with absolute commitment, you allowed an excuse to take the driver's seat. You said, I don't have the time, I don't have the money, I don't know the right people, I'm too tired, I'll start next week. And in that moment, you believed you were being reasonable, But the truth is you were simply avoiding the discomfort that growth demands. The harsh reality is that excuses destroy futures because they rob you of momentum. They rob you of urgency. They rob you of consistency. And while one excuse may seem small, excuses compound. They pile up. They multiply until one day you look around and realize years have passed and the life you envisioned is still out of reach because you couldn't have it, but because you kept handing your power away to weak justifications that disguise themselves as protection from failure, when in truth, they were the reason for failure all along. And you need to understand that excuses don't vanish on their own. You have to declare war on them. You have to call them out the moment they appear and refuse to negotiate with them. Because every second you entertain an excuse, every time you let it breathe, it grows stronger and embeds itself deeper into your mindset until it becomes a belief. And once an excuse hardens into a belief, it becomes your reality. And once it becomes your reality, you stop even questioning it. And that is the real danger. The people who change their lives, who build empires, who transform their bodies, who rise from nothing to something incredible, are not the people who never felt tempted to make excuses. And they are simply the ones who refuse to live inside them. They crushed them. They recognized them for the lies they were. And they built discipline and resilience instead, because discipline is the antidote to excuses. It is the practice of moving forward despite discomfort, despite fear, despite the rationalizations that scream in your head and say, slow down, take it easy, you don't need this. But when you choose discipline over excuses, you step into power, you create a new identity that no longer bows down to weakness, but chooses strength over and over again until strength becomes who you know deep down that every excuse you've ever told yourself has cost you something. Maybe it cost you opportunities you'll never get back. Maybe it cost you health that you could have preserved. Maybe it cost you relationships that could have grown stronger. Maybe it cost you the confidence that only comes from doing the hard things you promised yourself you would do. And when you think about that pain, when you realize what excuses have already stolen, you should feel an urgency to never allow them to take another piece of your future, because what you're really doing when you give into an excuse is choosing short-term comfort over long-term greatness. And the problem with short-term comfort is that it always creates long-term comfortable, because they relieve you of responsibility in the moment. They make you feel like you're not failing. They trick you into thinking you're safe, but the bill always comes due, because one day you'll wake up and the weight of all the excuses will sit heavy on your chest, and you'll realize you traded the chance to live powerfully for the illusion of safety. You'll realize you settled for less when more was always possible. And that moment of regret is one of the most painful experiences a human being can face, because you can't go back in time and undo it, but you can stop right now. You can stop fueling excuses, and you can begin living with a standard that says, I do not negotiate with my weakness. I do not compromise my future. I do not listen to the soft lies that try to protect me from discomfort. I destroy excuses before they destroy me. It's a battle every single day. But it's a battle you can win, because each time you face an excuse and reject it, you grow stronger, your mindset shifts, your identity transforms, you start to believe in your own strength more than in your fears. You begin to rewire your brain to expect action instead of delay, to expect commitment instead of hesitation. And eventually what once felt impossible becomes automatic, because the old patterns of excuse making have been replaced by patterns of courage and execution. And when that shift happens, your life changes at its core, because the future you create will not be stolen from you anymore. It will be shaped by you consciously, powerfully, relentlessly. Comfort is the enemy of growth, because every time you choose comfort, you are choosing to remain the same. And while comfort feels safe, familiar, and soothing in the moment, it secretly robs you of the very strength, resilience, and opportunity that you need in order to evolve into the person you know you can be. Because growth by its very nature requires pressure. It requires challenge. It requires stepping into situations where you do not feel secure, where you do not feel in control and where you are forced to stretch beyond what feels easy, and that stretching is painful, it is uncomfortable, but it is the only environment where real transformation happens because nothing great was ever built inside the walls of comfort. When you look at every area of life, the principle repeats itself in your body. If you never push your muscles beyond what feels light and easy, they will never grow. They will never adapt. They will never become stronger because the body only grows when it is forced to, when it is pushed, when it is challenged to handle more than before. And the same principle applies to your mind, your career, your relationships, your finances, your confidence, your leadership. If you always stay in the zone of comfort where you know exactly what to expect and you avoid situations that challenge you, and you might feel safe, but you will remain small, and over time that safety turns into stagnation, and stagnation always breeds frustration because deep down every human being has a need to expand, to evolve, to grow into something greater. And when that need is suffocated by comfort, the result is an inner emptiness that no amount of ease can fill. Comfort tells you that you've done enough, that you can relax, that you deserve a break. And while rest has its place, too much comfort becomes a slow death because life is not designed for us to stay in one place. Life is designed to stretch us and to challenge us, to constantly invite us into the next level of who we can be. And yet most people resist that invitation because comfort feels easier. But what feels easier today will feel like regret tomorrow, because when you stay in comfort, opportunities pass you by. The world moves forward and you are left behind wondering what could have been if only you had chosen discomfort over safety. Growth only happens when you are willing to be uncomfortable, when you are willing to do the things you don't feel ready for, when you are willing to face rejection, when you are willing to walk into the unknown, when you are willing to carry the weight of responsibility instead of running from it. And in those moments where you feel stretched, where you feel exposed, where you feel the fear of failure breathing down your neck, that is exactly where growth is being forged. That is where your character is being built. That is where your confidence is being shaped. And that is where you prove to yourself that you are capable of more than you thought. The enemy called comfort whispers lies. It tells you to wait for the right time. It tells you that you're not ready yet. It tells you that you'll take the leap later, when the conditions are perfect. But the conditions are never perfect, and waiting for perfect conditions is just another way of protecting your comfort. Yet the people who rise, the people who transform, the people who achieve greatness are the ones who step forward despite the imperfection, despite the discomfort, despite the uncertainty, because they understand that the very thing they fear is the very thing that will expand them into the next version of themselves. And once you understand that, you begin to see discomfort not as a punishment, but as a gift, not as a signal to stop, but as a signal to move forward. Look at your own life and ask yourself, how many times have you chosen comfort over growth? How many times have you turned away from an opportunity because it scared you? How many times have you played small because it was easier than facing the possibility of failing? And then think about what that choice cost you. Think about the strength you could have built, the skills you could have learned, the doors you could have opened, the experiences you could have lived, and understand that every time you chose comfort, you traded a piece of your future for a temporary sense of ease. And that trade is always unfair because ease passes quickly, but growth lasts forever. But the path of growth is uncomfortable, but it is also where all fulfillment lies. Because nothing will give you a deeper sense of pride. Nothing will build more inner fire. Nothing will make you feel more alive than knowing you faced what scared you and you embraced the challenge. You stepped into the unknown and you conquered it. And every time you do this, you raise your standard for what is possible in your life. You expand your identity. You build unshakable belief in yourself, and eventually you begin to crave discomfort because you recognize it as the gateway to everything you desire. Comfort is the enemy, not because rest or recovery is bad, but because the human mind will always choose the path of least resistance if left unchecked. It will always lean toward what is easy. And without discipline, that tendency will rule your life and keep you locked in mediocrity. So you must fight against it consciously. You must train yourself to step into discomfort on purpose, to deliberately put yourself into situations where you don't have all the answers, to push your body harder, to challenge your limits, to face fears instead of avoiding them. And in doing so, you develop the muscle of resilience, the habit of courage, and the mindset of growth. Every time you choose discomfort over comfort, you send a message to yourself that you are in control, that you are not ruled by weakness, that you are not governed by fear, and that you are committed to becoming the strongest version of yourself, no matter the cost. And the more you do this, the stronger you become, the more unstoppable you feel, the more momentum you build, and soon the comfort zone that once felt safe begins to feel suffocating because you realize it never gave you life. It only kept you asleep while your potential remained dormant. And when you wake up to that truth, you understand fully why comfort is the enemy of growth and why discomfort is the only path to becoming who you were meant to be. Every decision is a battle between your weak self and your strong self, because within you there are two voices. And one that calls you to step up, to do more, to push harder, to demand excellence, and another that pulls you down, that whispers of ease, that tempts you with shortcuts, that convinces you to settle. And every choice you make throughout the day is a reflection of which voice you choose to obey. Every action you take is either feeding the weak version or feeding the strong version. And that is why your life is nothing more than the accumulation of those small decisions. Because in every moment you are voting for the person you become. The weak self is clever. It disguises itself as reason. It says just one more hour of sleep, just one more day of procrastination, just one more excuse. And it sounds so logical that you often don't even recognize it for what it is, a thief of your destiny. And the strong self is quieter. It doesn't beg. It doesn't whine. It simply challenges you. It tells you to get up when you don't feel like it. It tells you to keep going when everything in your body wants to quit. It tells you to hold the line, to follow through, to honor your word. And when you listen to that voice, you strengthen it. When you choose it over the weak self, you train yourself to live with discipline, to act with courage, to become unstoppable. The truth is that greatness is not built in rare moments of massive victory. Greatness is built in the daily war between these two selves, in the ordinary moments when no one is watching, when no one will praise you, when it is just you and the choice in front of you. Do you take the easy road or the hard road? Do you step into growth or fall into comfort? Do you align with your highest potential or give in to your lowest impulses? And then the outcome of your life is determined by how many times you win that battle, not once, not twice, but over and over again until the strong self dominates. Think about your day. From the moment you wake up, the battle begins. The alarm rings and your weak self says, hit snooze, you deserve rest. But your strong self says, rise now. This is your chance to start with discipline. And whichever choice you make sets the tone for everything that follows. When it is time to work, the weak self says, just check your phone. Just take it slow. Nobody will notice, but the strong self says, focus, give your best, build momentum, because the world rewards those who follow through. When it comes to your health, the weak self says, skip the workout, indulge in the junk. But the strong self says, train your body, fuel your energy, honor your commitment, because your body is the foundation of your life. And again, you choose, and every choice either strengthens weakness or strengthens strength. The weak self thrives on instant gratification. It wants the pleasure now, the relief now, the comfort now, even at the cost of your long-term vision. The strong self lives for delayed gratification. It endures discomfort in the present for a greater reward in the future. It sacrifices what is easy today for what is powerful tomorrow. And that is the dividing line between mediocrity and mastery, between average and exceptional, between living a life of regret and living a life of pride. And the battle is not occasional. It is constant. It is every moment, because both selves are always present. Both are always speaking, and you cannot silence them. You can only choose which one to empower, The weak self will tell you stories to justify itself. It will say you're not ready yet. It will say it doesn't matter. It will say you can try again tomorrow. And if you believe those stories long enough, they become your truth. They become your identity. They become the lens through which you see yourself. But the strong self also tells stories. It says you are more powerful than you think. It says you can handle more than you believe. It says you are capable, resilient, worthy. And when you choose that narrative consistently, you reshape who you are. You begin to embody strength. You begin to believe in your own fire, and that belief transforms everything. This battle is the defining reality of your life, because it is not the world outside that determines who you become. It is the choices you make in the quiet war within yourself. And the problem is most people don't even realize there is a battle. They think they are just tired, just unlucky, just unmotivated, when in truth they are simply losing to their weak self day after day, and every loss compounds. Every time they give and they weaken their willpower, they weaken their confidence, they weaken their ability to act, and eventually they start to identify as the weak self itself. They begin to say, this is just who I am, and I'm not disciplined, I'm not strong, I'm not consistent, and that lie becomes their identity. But it was never the truth. It was only the result of repeated choices in favor of weakness. The moment you recognize this is a battle, you can begin to win it, because awareness is power. And once you know that every decision matters, you stop treating your small choices as insignificant. You realize that saying no to the donut when you promised yourself discipline is not about the donut. It is about proving to yourself that your strong self is in charge. You realize that finishing the workout when you want to quit is not about the workout. It is about building the identity of someone who follows through. You realize that pushing through work when you're tired is not about the single task. It is about training your mind to dominate excuses. And once you understand this, every moment becomes an opportunity to strengthen the warrior inside you. The strong self grows through use. The more you choose it, the more natural it becomes. The more powerful it feels, the more automatic it gets, until eventually the strong self becomes your default. Until eventually you no longer hesitate when faced with hard choices, because the habit of strength has been burned into your character. And that is when you become unstoppable. That is when you look back and realize the weak self has no hold over you anymore, because you have starved it of attention. You have denied it of power, and you have chosen again and again to align with your higher self. You cannot eliminate the weak self completely, because it will always be there, whispering, tempting, waiting, but you can starve it. You can weaken it to the point where its voice no longer controls you. And the only way to do that is through relentless choice, through showing up every single day, through refusing to let even the smallest decisions slide into weakness. And when you live like that, when you honor the strong self consistently, your life begins to reflect strength in every area: your body, your mind, your relationships, your career, your dreams, all of it shaped by the daily victories you've won against the weaker version of you. Kill the old patterns and unleash the unstoppable version of you, because the life you want cannot be built with the same habits and routines and mindsets that created the life you are trying to escape. The old patterns are chains, and they are the invisible prison that keeps you stuck in cycles you swore you would break. They are the repeated choices that feel comfortable because they are familiar, but they sabotage you because they never allow you to become who you are meant to be. And as long as you keep feeding them, you will stay trapped in the same loop, repeating the same mistakes, living the same story, and wondering why nothing ever changes. Every person has patterns, ways of thinking and acting that run on autopilot. And most of those patterns were created long ago. Some in childhood, some in moments of fear, some in moments of failure. And they became so ingrained that you don't even question them anymore. They just feel like who you are, but they are not who you are. They are simply habits you've repeated so many times, they turned into identity. And if those patterns are built on weakness, on fear, on excuses, then they will keep pulling you back. No matter how much you say you want change, Because wanting is not enough. You must destroy the patterns that contradict your vision and build new ones that align with your strength. The old patterns show up in countless ways. The procrastination that stops you from taking action, the self-doubt that convinces you not to try, the fear of judgment that silences your voice, the negative self-talk that convinces you you're not worthy, the tendency to start strong but quit when it gets hard, the cycle of working hard for a week and then falling off because discipline feels heavy, the emotional triggers that lead to destructive choices. And if you are honest with yourself, you can see these patterns, you can trace them back, you can notice that every time you fail, it's not random, it's not bad luck, it's the same old pattern pulling you back like a magnet to mediocrity. Killing the old patterns means refusing to tolerate them any longer. It means recognizing them in the moment and saying, no, not this time, not anymore. And it means interrupting the cycle and replacing it with a new behavior that aligns with the person you want to become. And this is not easy because your brain is wired for efficiency. It always wants to take the path it already knows, but transformation comes when you interrupt that wiring and force yourself to act differently, even when it feels uncomfortable, even when it feels unnatural, because only by repeated interruption and replacement does the brain rewire itself into new automatic patterns. The unstoppable version of you cannot emerge as long as the old patterns are alive, because they are like weeds in a garden. No matter how much you water the flowers, if you don't pull out the weeds, they will choke out the growth. They will steal the nutrients. They will take up the space, and eventually your garden will die. And the same is true in life. You cannot build greatness while allowing patterns of weakness to take root. You cannot build confidence while entertaining patterns of self-doubt. You cannot build success while living in patterns of procrastination. You cannot build strength while surrendering to patterns of comfort. You must rip them out at the root and replace them with patterns that feed your vision. The unstoppable version of you is already inside, waiting, but it is buried under the weight of these old patterns, buried under years of conditioning, buried under habits that no longer serve you. And the moment you begin killing those patterns, you begin to free that version. You begin to unleash the strength, the resilience, the fire that has been there all along but was caged by your own repetition of weakness. And when you kill the old patterns, you stop living in conflict, you stop living in contradiction, you stop saying you want greatness while acting like someone who accepts mediocrity. Instead, you become aligned. Your words and your actions match, your vision and your habits match. And that alignment creates momentum so powerful, nothing can stop it. To kill the old patterns, you must first identify them with brutal honesty, and you must shine a light on the behaviors you know are destroying your potential. You must stop pretending you don't know, because deep down you do know. You know the habits that waste your time, the thoughts that weaken your mind, the environments that drag you down, the people who feed your excuses, and the routines that make you soft. And you must be ruthless enough to confront them, to cut them out, to destroy them without negotiation, because you cannot negotiate with weakness. If you give it an inch, it will take a mile. If you give it a voice, it will drown out your strength. So you must silence it and replace it with action that moves you forward. Replacement is the key, because you cannot simply stop a pattern. The void will pull you back. You must replace it with something stronger. You replace procrastination with immediate action. You replace negative self-talk with affirmations of strength. You replace fear of judgment with bold expression. You replace quitting with pushing through. You replace laziness with discipline. And at first it feels unnatural because you are breaking the cycle, but repetition creates normality. And soon the new pattern becomes who you are. And every time you repeat it, you strengthen the unstoppable version of yourself. The unstoppable you is built from new patterns of consistency, patterns of courage, patterns of discipline, patterns of resilience, patterns of relentless pursuit. And once those patterns take over, momentum builds. And momentum is the most powerful force in personal transformation, because once you have momentum, you no longer need to fight for every step. And The new version of you carries you forward. The fire burns on its own. And what once felt like effort now feels like identity. What once felt like struggle now feels like natural rhythm. And at that point, you are no longer forcing change. You are living it. Killing the old patterns is not a one-time event. It is a daily process. Every day you must be vigilant. Every day you must catch yourself before the old behaviors sneak back in. Every day you must reaffirm your commitment to the new identity, because the old patterns will try to return. They will wait for weakness. They will wait for stress. They will wait for fatigue. And in those moments, you must rise higher. You must remember who you are building. You must remember the unstoppable version of yourself you are unleashing. And you must not give the old patterns a chance to take root again. When you do this long enough, when you are relentless enough, when you hold the line without compromise, the old patterns lose their power. They become faint memories of a person you no longer are. And the new patterns become permanent. They become natural. They become the new autopilot that drives you forward toward strength, success, and fulfillment. And this is when you finally unleash the unstoppable version of yourself, the version that is no longer shackled by excuses, no longer chained by fear, no longer sabotaged by procrastination, but instead driven by strength, fueled by purpose, and aligned with destiny. Thank you for listening. And don't forget to like and subscribe.